Very pleased to have with us in studio this afternoon the president of the National Rifle Association, Mr. David Keene. David, thank you so much for your time.
Always a pleasure to be here.
Boy, there's been so much that's happened since the last time we spoke. I almost don't even know where to begin, but let's actually talk about news that came out earlier today. The Board of Education in Newtown, Connecticut, asking that more funds be raised locally to put armed school security in every elementary school there in Newtown.
That's right. As one of the board members there said, it's about security, and we need security. That's what we've been saying all along, because you can't screen out every potential lunatic in the country, so you need to protect the kids. And after the Newtown tragedy, as you know, that's what Wayne urged that we provide. And the president and others, and particularly the major media, said, well, this is a crazy idea. Why would you want to protect the kids? Even though we protect banks and jewelry stores and office buildings and all the rest. And I think they were shocked, Cam, when the Gallup poll came out and said that people thought there were two things that you could do. The two most important things that you could do to prevent additional new towns were, one, provide security to the schools, and two, do something about the fact that we have a totally dysfunctional mental health care system in this country, which has released dangerous people onto the streets. That's why when the president made his statement, he included school security. He'd said at first that his people had said that it was not a good idea. Then he said he was skeptical. Then he included it. But look at this. They had said earlier that it was a crazy idea because it would cost upwards of $1 billion if we did it through the federal government, which is not what the NRA has urged.
Okay.
But then in his statement, he said, I'm going to provide $4 billion for police. That wasn't for school security. That was another small stimulus package so that he could provide more taxpayers' dollars to pay for public employees out in the states. He then said, but I will provide up to 1,000 resource officers. Those are armed guards that can protect schools. There are 130,000 schools or so in this country. About 30,000 of them have security, and the president has magnanimously suggested that we ought to perhaps protect 1,000 of the additional 100,000. I don't know what you would call that, but I would call it doing something in the ocean. And it was actually a fig leaf so he could get back to the gun agenda. But most people out there, educators, teachers, local officials, and parents, think that the #1 goal has to be to protect the children, and the decision in Newtown was consistent with that. They want to prevent this. They're not interested in going out and pursuing an agenda that's more ideological than real. I don't think they're interested in going out and saying we don't want crazed killers to have guns that we think are ugly. We want to have better-looking guns from our perspective. Yeah. I don't think they're out there saying, if somebody gets into one of our schools, we'd rather that he have two 10-round clips rather than the 30-round clip of ammo. I think what they're saying is, let's keep those people out of our schools and let's protect our kids.
Absolutely. I recently moved, and my new neighbors, one of them is the county sheriff, and the other one actually works for the local school district. And unprompted, the first time I met these guys, they brought up the issue, and the sheriff, I'm very relieved to learn, does not support Senator Feinstein's gun control laws. The individual who works for the schools, we started talking about school security. He brought it up, and he's one of the guys who works in the facilities. And he said, and I'll never forget the tone of his voice when he talked about one of the schools actually did just upgrade its security system. And I'm not going to say what school he said was utterly defenseless, but he said, and there was such heartbreak in his voice, he said, but we've got one facility that's just wide open. Right. And you could tell it bothered him that it was that was the case.
And there are thousands of schools like that all over the country. And what Wayne suggested, while it was met with derision by the mainstream media right after the Connecticut shootings, was that in every school district, the parents, the teachers, the administrators, the local law enforcement officials should sit down and decide what works for their schools. Earlier this week, Asa Hutchinson, who, as you know, was appointed by Wayne for the NRA to head an independent school shield program. Asa was the #2 man at Homeland Security. He was the director of the Drug Enforcement Agency and former U.S. attorney as well as congressman. And he's been designing that, and he's been talking to school administrators and others all over the country. And you know, in some schools, lots of schools, hundreds of schools, there are already informal ways to protect the school. There are teachers who are in fact armed and who have received additional training beyond the simple concealed carry course.
Right.
There are administrators who are armed. And in some schools, they let everybody know that and often don't say who it is. It's a little bit like a concealed carry in the school or the U.S. Air Marshal on the plane. And the one thing that we do know, when I talk to these mainstream media people or when you talk to congressmen, we're not experts on mental health. We know there's a real problem.
Right.
And we're not experts on school security. That's why Wayne asked Asa, who is an expert on this sort of thing, to look into it. We know a little bit about guns. We know a little bit about what works and what doesn't work in terms of prosecuting criminals and all of the other things that have been suggested. And the fact of the matter is that the way you protect schools is that you protect them with armed security. And the reason that works is the same reason that if you have a German Shepherd in your backyard, a burglar goes next door. Because the people that involve themselves in school shootings are not wannabe warriors, they're wannabe killers. And they're looking for a killing field. They're not looking to shoot it out with an armed civilian, an armed teacher, an armed administrator, an armed police officer. They're looking for some place that they can just wander in and find a group of innocent victims that they can shoot. And so armed security does work, and it will work. It worked yesterday in Atlanta, Georgia.
Not according to Piers Morgan. Piers Morgan says the armed guard was not able to stop this shooting at a school in Atlanta. Just like I guess the police officer who pulls you over was not able to stop you from speeding, but he was able to stop you from speeding anymore. This security officer yesterday was able to prevent this individual from engaging in any more mayhem.
Well, you know, the magazine Mother Jones had done a study of mass shootings and said that no armed security guard, no cop, nobody had ever stopped a mass shooting. Mm-hmm. And they did that by saying that unless 4 or more people died, it wasn't a mass shooting. So if you're successful in stopping it, you haven't successfully stopped a mass shooting. I guess what they expect is that you'll sit there and wait for the 5th body to drop before you shoot the shooter, and then you could say, I stopped a mass shooting. The fact of the matter is that the goal of security, the goal of having these folks around, is to make sure they won't kill 4 people, 5 people, or a dozen people. So it worked there, it's worked elsewhere, and it'll work in the future.
Absolutely. And I'm looking at a story here, Larry Keene in the Daily Caller. It says, Minnesota Public Radio reports Mayor R.T. Ryback of Minneapolis has said that he and 60 other mayors are considering boycotts of gun makers who don't agree to their sweeping list of gun control demands, much like Rahm Emanuel, has written to banks encouraging them and actually chiding them for doing business with firearms manufacturers and say, don't do this unless these manufacturers agree to gun control. You know, it seems like this is, David, not using the legislative branch, not using the executive branch, not even using the bully pulpit. It's just bullying.
That's exactly what it is. It's threatening, it's bullying, it's trying to get folks who are dependent upon you or who you control or who you can threaten into not doing business with people you don't like. If you and I did that, we'd be arrested because that's tortious interference with the legitimate business activity. You know, this happened right away with the Freedom Group that owns Remington and the others, which was part of a larger group, Cerberus. Mm-hmm. And what happened was it turned out that they had something like $700 million invested from the pension funds in California. And so they said, you either get rid of Bushmaster and these companies or we're withdrawing the funds. Now, the result of that is going to be that those gun companies are going to be in the hands of gun people, ultimately, and not in the hands of just simple investors. So it all ends up as being good. But gun companies around the country and people that are in the firearms distribution business are right now having difficulty getting financing because of these efforts. I'll tell you one thing. What they ought to notice is what happened in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania last week. You know, this was the most incredible example of why people on the ground, why our people can make a difference. And for those of your listeners who didn't see it or haven't been there, the Harrisburg, the Eastern Outdoor Show, is the single largest outdoor show in the United States on an annual basis. I cut the ribbon there last year, And in a week, it attracts something like 1.2 million people. It's an $80 million outdoor show. There are outfitters there who write $500,000 worth of business during the course of that week. And the organizers of that show decided that they weren't going to allow any weapons, firearms that the president and Dianne Feinstein don't like to be displayed. Within 24 hours, really led by not the gun people. The first people to pull out were the bow hunters and Cabela's,
Yep.
And then the fishermen and the gun groups within 24 hours, over 300 vendors had pulled out. Within 36 hours, the largest outdoor show in America was gone.
It was
closed, over. And that's a sign of two things. One, it's a sign of the kind of power that people at the grassroots who are the consumers of these things and who attend shows and do all of the other things that you do if you're involved in the shooting sports and outdoor activities, the kind of influence they can have when they act as one. And secondly, and perhaps just as importantly right now, they weren't all gun people, but they were all people who knew that an assault on the Second Amendment was an assault on everything they believed in. So it wasn't just the firearms manufacturers, the firearms distributors, it wasn't even just the outfitters, it wasn't any of these people, it was everybody.
Yeah.
And I know that Kyle Weaver, who is our head of general operations at the NRA, was at the Safari Club meeting at the time, and he was talking to an outfitter who said last year he wrote over $500,000 worth of business at that show. And he's told Kyle, I have no idea how I'm going to make that up, but it's worth it. And he was one of the people that boycotted.
You know, it is amazing. I remember, I think Wolf Marine was one of those who pulled on. They were planning on having a huge exhibit there, 30 boats.
Oh, yeah,
there.
they have like an entire building.
And they said, no, we're not going to be a part of this. And, you know, you looked at the, I mean, you saw the divide and conquer strategy that Bill Clinton tried to impose in the 1990s. You know, and we're even seeing it now with the constant appeals to hunters and sportsmen, and President Obama saying he goes skeet shooting all the time at Camp David.
Yeah, I bet. You know, I wrote a column some years ago because he threw out the first ball at the opening of the baseball season, and he wore his Chicago White Sox hat, which I find offensive because I'm a Chicago White Sox fan. And then he went up for a softball interview at ESPN, and they asked him, growing up, you were a Chicago White Sox fan? And he said, yes. And they said, well, who's your favorite player? And he couldn't answer it. And he said, well, I support other teams as well. The fact is he isn't, and I'll bet that if you actually handed him a shotgun and said, here we are, shoot some skeet for us, he wouldn't be able to hit anything or wouldn't be able to figure out how to reload the shotgun. So this is the kind of empty rhetoric. This is the 2013 equivalent of John Kerry when he's running for president, putting on the camouflage coat with the sales tag on the back. It's fraudulent, and people see right through it now.
So we had the first hearing, first of many, I assume, in Congress. Where do you see the political reality right now in terms of you know, these gun control laws that Senator Feinstein and others are proposing?
Well, in order to pass these things in the Senate, which is where the action's going to be, because the House is sitting back saying, you know, okay, Harry, go ahead. Let's see what you're going to do. In order to pass it, the President and Dianne Feinstein need the support of Democrats who live in states that are very gun-friendly, states in which there's going to be elections in 2014. Think of Louisiana. Think of Arkansas. Think of Alaska. Think of Montana. These are states where the gun tradition, the firearms tradition, is part of the fabric of the society. These senators know the danger of going against people on Second Amendment issues. They know that people who believe in the Second Amendment will vote. All of these senators are in a terrible position. Think about it. If you were one of them, think about any one of them, Max Baucus in Montana or Pryor in Arkansas. If they go along with the president, if they go along with Dianne Feinstein, they may very well be looking at losing an election. Mm-hmm. If they don't, what will happen to them is what's happened up in the Dakotas now with a freshman senator who criticized the president's extremism on Second Amendment issue, and she's being barraged with attack ads from the far left groups that support this.
Right.
So if you're one of those senators, you don't know quite what to do right now. And some hard choices are going to have to be made. That's why the Senate Majority Leader, Senator Reid, has made it, he's saying, you know, read these things carefully, make up your mind carefully. If he could slow walk all this into the next century in order to save his members from having to cast a vote, he'd do it. But this time, votes are going to be cast. And senators are going to have to take a stand. They've been able to avoid it for a long time and say, you know, we're friendly. I shoot skeet just like the president, so don't be mad at me. And we don't go after politicians who don't go after us.
Right.
But this time, they either have to stand with the Second Amendment or they have to oppose it. It may not be on the so-called assault weapons ban, because that may never make it to the floor because that's such a big one, and I think that a lot of Democrats don't want to be there. Remember, around Christmas, Bill Clinton, who's been there, warned the president that this is really not a road you want to just casually wander down, because at the end of the day, it might not end as well for you as you think it will, because he's been there, he knows what's at the end of that road. And so do those members of the Senate. So I think that they all wish that this whole thing would go away. It's not going to go away because Michael Bloomberg and the president and Dianne Feinstein and the rest are going to push. But I think myself that they're shocked by things like the Eastern Outdoor Show. They're shocked by the rallies that have taken place all over the country. Remember their narrative. Their narrative is that, you know, really the NRA and the gun owners we represent don't have nearly the influence that we once had, that most of our members don't really agree with us, that they would really like all of these different controls and restrictions. They find them reasonable or commonsensical, as the president might say. And so therefore, speaking to their members in Congress, don't worry about them. It's all changed. Members of Congress and members of the Senate know that not only has it not changed, but we're more united and there are more of us than there have ever been.
NRA President David Keene, thank you so much, sir, for joining us in studio this afternoon. You're welcome back anytime.
Anytime you want me, I'll be here.
Thank you so much.